Welcome to the Plant-Based Podcast. Did you know that plants are truly amazing? Not only can you grow them and eat them, you can also wear them, drink them, nourish your skin with them, and so much more. Let Ellen and Michael inspire you to love plants as much as they do, as they chat with the movers and shakers in this wonderful plant-based world. So, let's dig in.
Now, we should all be cautious of caring for our environment and making small, sustainable changes in our day-to-day lives. So why not start by making some delicious changes? Stoneleigh Wines create their premium wine in New Zealand, and it's made from 100% sustainably sourced grapes and is vegan certified. Stoneleigh's Sauvignon Blanc expresses vibrancy and fresh flavours of the Marlborough region and is a minimal intervention wine and collaborates with nature. We have a unique discount for our listeners so you can get 20% off Stoneleigh Sauvignon Blanc exclusively on Amazon using the code Stoneleigh20.
So our guest on today's podcast is Dan Bradbury. He's the Director of Brand and Communications from the World Land Trust, who protects some of the most threatened and biodiverse habitats on our big, beautiful planet that we live on. And of course, plants play a huge role in this. So we're really looking forward to finding out more from Dan. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, really nice to meet you both.
Good to see you, Dan. So thank you for coming on the podcast. Before you're going to tell us a little bit more about the World Land Trust, we've actually got a quick fire question round, which is going to warm us all up, make sure we're all comfortable with everyone in the room, and we're ready for then the serious questions. But are you ready? You have to answer very quickly. Some people dawdle. Promise me you won't dawdle.
I'll give it a go.
Okay, we're starting straight away. Peanut butter or Marmite?
Marmite.
Okay.
Morning bird or night owl?
Night owl.
Peonies or roses?
Sorry, what was that?
Peonies or roses?
Oh, peonies.
Hey.
Tidy desk or messy desk?
Messy.
Tea or coffee?
Neither.
Oh.
Ooh, we'll
so
discuss
cool.
that in a moment. Paper book or audio book?
Paper book.
Dog or cat?
Dog.
Beach or mountains?
Mountains.
There we go. That's your quick fire question round. Dan doesn't
all
drink
limbered
tea or
up now.
coffee. We're all limbered up. Look, we're all stretched out now.
We're ready to go.
So Dan, you love Marmite. You're a night owl. You love peonies. You have a messy desk. You don't drink tea or coffee. You prefer a paper book. You like dogs and you prefer mountains. Is that what you said?
Yeah, absolutely.
You literally answered every question that I would have. Your answers are the same as what I would have answered for all of those things.
Well, there we go. That's good. There we go.
It's actually a psychological test, by the way. It's not just
Was it? I have no idea what you're going to work out from that.
I don't know, but I'm sure someone online will probably give us a roundup. Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. Let's just talk about the World Land Trust. Can you tell us a bit more about the trust and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So, look, as an organisation, we've got this really simple ethos, really, about how we work, and I'm going to name drop, and it's kind of best summed up by our patron, Sir David Attenborough, who basically says to save a species, you need to save ecosystems, and save ecosystems, you need to save land. So, as our name suggests, we believe that land is the most important aspect of any conservation project. So if you're going to say, you want to say you're going to save a species, well, the species needs to have land. It needs to have an area to live in. So, but by saving land, you save everything that's in it. So from those micro species all the way up to those big apex predators and everything in between. So, and as we're going to talk about today, plants obviously play an important part in any ecosystem. And then the other thing that's really key to any project working is you work with local people. So as an organisation, World Land Trust doesn't actually own any of the land it's protected. So we've now protected and funded the protection of 2.6 million acres. But all of that land is in the ownership of local organisations who employ local people. So if you want anything to work, you need to get local people on side. And that's any project, whether it's land purchase, which some things we do. We create community reserves where we pay subsidies for people to manage land in the right way for conservation, and also tree plantings involved in that as well. So it's got all of these aspects. So it's about biodiversity, it's about people, but also it plays a huge part on the climate crisis that we're facing at the moment as well.
I'm really interested to kind of delve a little bit deeper into what you do. It's all so important. Do you have kind of maybe a couple of examples of the projects that you support? And I know you also have been, you work out in Madagascar. I think that's a campaign for this year, isn't it? And there's some threatened orchids there as well. So perhaps a little bit more information about that.
Yeah, so look, as the name suggests, we're all around the world. So ranging from Malaysia and Borneo, Philippines, through Vietnam, into places like Armenia, Africa, and then a lot in Central and South America. But what we do is we have these kind of key periods of time where we focus in certain areas. So at the moment, we've just launched a project to save an area of land in Madagascar. So it's a 200-hectare project where we're also going to plant 500,000 trees in there. And why is it important? So Madagascar's lost 90% of its natural habitats have already gone. So land is vanishing at a rapid rate of knots. But if you take Madagascar on its own, Madagascar, about 82% of the plants and roughly 90% of the animals are found nowhere else on the planet.
Wow.
And this is because Madagascar split sort of 80 million plus years ago, separated. So what it's done is created this kind of island of isolated species. So, and just kind of, let's say, for the purpose of this conversation around plants, is they reckon around about 14,000 vascular plant species are found on Madagascar alone.
Wow.
So this place is rich. It's kind of when our partner organisation is the Missouri Botanical Gardens Madagascar project. When they first went there, which I think was in around 2009, they basically said wherever you went, whatever footsteps you took, you found something new. You found a new species. Discovered something. So. And again, kind of lots of these projects, there's things that will link to people's homes, and things that. So there's one is the Dipsis elegans, which is this fern. So it's like a feather-like palmate leaf that it has. Many people have got similar plants or subsequent species of that plant in their home. The big ferns that people have in their bathrooms, those kind of things. So there's those things there, but. It's another place that's really rich, and you mentioned orchids. So there's around, I think there's over 900 orchid species on Madagascar alone. So you think about that, and actually one of them is one species of orchids is found basically in this one small plot of forest that we're trying to protect, nowhere else. Wow. So it's a singular species, and it's a really showy plant. It's really just the most incredible looking thing. It's kind of got these cascading star-shaped flowers that hangs down. It's got these bronze-coloured petals. And what always amazes me, having been to a couple of projects around the world, is I suppose we're all used to seeing these orchids that are kind of sat in your home, that people have, is that actually a lot of these orchids that, the ones I've been lucky enough to see kind of are in cloud forests in these kind of really cold, wet, moist areas. this particular area where this orchid is 219 days of rain a year. It's really wet, really moist environment. And these things are growing up, and I don't know. It's difficult because you expect to see them kind of in these kind of certain locations, and you guys, and I'm probably telling you what you already know, but this particular orchid grows up in these moss-covered trees, kind of high up in the canopy area of it. So there are these epiphytes, so they kind of grow. These are plants that grow on other plants. So again, teaching you stuff you probably know, but it's just really interesting, really fascinating when you get to see these plants in. I've not been to Madagascar, but the orchids I've seen in places like Mexico and in Guatemala is just. You're kind of walking in a forest and you suddenly go, hang on a minute, what the heck's that? You just don't expect to see it. It's just kind of really strange because I'm so used to seeing them sat in a pot on a windowsill.
We're so conditioned to that, aren't we, with so many orchids? Thanks to
I think the explanation is great anyway, because for many listeners, they might want to know what that is and what that means and where they grow. So that's all good information for sure. But I have to say, every time we say Madagascar, I just keep thinking of the film. The film Madagascar.
Yeah, so the crazy ring-tailed lemur and the penguins.
Yeah, I know, that's so bizarre. But anyway, yeah.
So Dan, how does it work? Before we move on, how is it kind of all funded? And obviously when you go on the trips, you must work with a whole network of botanists at the same time. So how does everything happen in practice?
Yeah, so I don't get to go on too many trips, unfortunately, myself. But I'm lucky to have been to a couple of projects. But ultimately, funding for the organisation comes from several different channels. So we've now got support from around 250 businesses that support the work that we do. So some of that is pure philanthropic, and some of it is that we can support their carbon offsets as they work towards carbon neutrality or net zero. So we have these relationships with businesses. We have grants and foundations that supply funding, but a good chunk of funds comes from just individuals funding. So we're not reliant on one source, which is great. But the one thing is we have no government funding, so it's all coming from these philanthropic routes. And then what happens is the funds. So what happens is the project partners in these countries contact us. Wanting to carry out activities. We have a team of ecologists in the organisation who assess those projects and then determine what the likes of myself and the other guys are going to fundraise for, basically. And as I say, those projects really vary. They can be a 1 million hectare project or 1 million acre projects through to small scale projects. Some can be rainforests, they can be savanna, they can be mangrove forests. There's no kind of one size for wildlife trust. It's around us. It's around what can we do to tackle the biodiversity crisis and the climate crisis. We all talk a lot about the climate crisis, but the biodiversity crisis is happening at the same time. We are losing species at a rapid rate of knots. We're still finding these species, but they're losing them at a rapid rate, and that's prevalent all around the world, even in the UK. So,
understood.
And what would a project potentially look like? We see plants that are in danger, or you discover a new plant. What do you then practically do in order to then safeguard that plant or that environment? Kind of, what would a specific project perhaps look like?
So, as an example, a project which we funded and we've supported for a period of time is in Ecuador. So this is one of the world's most biodiverse countries. This is, I think it accounts for something like 0.2% of the surface or land area on the planet, but it's kind of home to around about 10% of all plant species that are found on the planet. There's something like 4,500 of those are found nowhere else on Earth. I think there's 1,000 species of orchid in Ecuador as well. So, and what these projects look like is that our project partner Ecominga, who's headed up by a botanist, a guy called Lou Jost, who's one of the most incredible people I've ever met. Super interesting. And he's discovered, I think it's 100 new species in this area, in this reserve. So what we're doing is we're creating protected areas. So we're creating reserves, basically. We do that in different methods, but this particular one was land purchase, because in the Americas, you can purchase land and you can kind of create a reserve and you can put that under protection. Whereas in other areas around the world, so in places, some of the African countries, you can't own land. But what we do is we work with the partners, then we work with the communities who manage areas in the right way for conservation. So all of these projects then have rangers who are then in those reserves doing the monitoring, but also these are the guys who are the front line of conservation. So they're the ones who are looking out for the illegal logging, the hunting, all of those kind of things. So, and actually, what's really interesting, so back to this project in Ecuador, is that some of those rangers actually used to be hunters.
Right.
Used to do those things. And we got a really nice quote from one of the rangers, and we got it on film, where he said, "We used to go out into the forest armed with guns, but now we go armed with a camera." So now they go out monitoring and just making these discoveries. And just to kind of talk about how rich this landscape is that on one walk, Lou discovered 5 new tree species. And we're not talking like little saplings, we're talking new trees, we're talking magnolia. So discovered 2 new magnolia species in this landscape. And again, orchids, I think he's discovered something like 60 species of orchid, even down to an entire new genus, an entire new family of orchids was discovered in this landscape. It's really rich. People go there and kind of go out and go on walks and discover new things all the time. But it's not just about those new things. It's about protecting these landscapes against encroachment from agriculture, monocultures, so kind of jumping around a bit, which is how my brain kind of works. And I apologize. If you go to Borneo, it's palm oil. So people, there's these threats, there's rubber tree plantations. We touched on tea and coffee earlier, the impact that they're having on the environment. So coffee in Vietnam it's kind of the forest is being cleared at rapid rates of knots, because to grow coffee, you need to have most of it, to fulfill the people's desires for instant coffee. It's robusta, and that needs to be sun grown, so they have to clear forest for that. So that's not the reason why I don't drink tea or coffee. I don't drink anything hot. So that's just the little side thing. So ultimately, what we do is we're creating these reserves, protecting these areas, working with local people to protect those areas, to stop them being cleared, so we can find new things and we can discover new things. Because if not, we're going to lose it. So
I think it's interesting, because it's very easy to sit within your own country and think that what happens in other countries, far off places, like Madagascar, Ecuador, from the UK, seems like a distant place that isn't related to anything that happens, for example, in the UK. But everything is linked, isn't it? So what happens over there does have a massive impact on what happens in the UK and across the world. So I guess when it comes to supporting charity, in the past, I have, for example, done, say, a charitable event, and it's been raising money for something overseas, and actually had a few people say, well, why would I spend my money on that when we've got things closer to home that need fixing, if you like. But everything is linked, isn't it? What happens there does have an impact on the world and each of us. And I know, Dan, you'll say something in a moment about that, but I have to just tell you this thing that I was reading the other day. that really kind of hit home. And I think it was perhaps the National Geographic article, maybe, that they were talking about how Sahara dust actually feeds the rainforest in South America. So if that Sahara dust didn't land over there, and the nutrient, I think it's the phosphorus that's in the broken down, creatures that have died in the Sahara Desert, and then that phosphorus goes into the soil, then the rainforest wouldn't be fed. That's from Africa to South America, and those tiny specks of dust make a difference. And that's how I kind of now see all of this. Do you know what I mean? Like every single little thing that happens across the pond or in some other country links back to everything we do.
Absolutely. There's not much more to add to that, really, other than we need to think of the bigger picture, and we need to think about everything that's happening. So, and yeah, it's all interlinked. And what we will see, if you're UK based, is that we're going to see these extreme weather conditions that are going to happen. This is all caused by the change in the climate. And there's all of these small things, they're all so interlinked that actually we're going to see it more. We're seeing we've got some projects where they're dealing with monsoons and floods, and then on the other side, we've got people who are dealing with fires. And as we see these increasing, weather conditions, is that when you've got fires, if winds increase, fires spread much quicker. And I think it's also to be kind of really clear that it's not just happening in one place. So the Amazon has become this kind of amazing flagship for conservation. We had the year when there was the fires were happening there in the Greater Nick, but actually they're happening all over the world. So this is happening everywhere. But at the same time, the Arctic was over 30 degrees for the first time. We've got one of our ambassadors was due to go out to the North Pole, and they believe that, so before to walk to the North Pole, and before it was kind of ice on ice on ice. Now there's only 1 year's worth of ice, so the ice is much thinner.
Wow.
And they think that actually there's only potential for the next 5 years where people will be able to ski to the North Pole, because after that it will be too fragile to do it.
Wow.
So we just need to think about the knock-on effects of everything that's happening. Is that it's not. We've got some incredible. So if you took the UK, we've got some incredible organisations doing some amazing things in the UK. And then there's organisations like the World Land Trust who are trying to support the wider world and the bigger picture with that. Because, so my thing is birds. So birds are the thing that really get me kind of going. And it's thinking about the impacts of, so protecting the areas of land in Africa protects the birds that come to the UK.
Right, yeah.
So, and it's like in the birds in North America, a lot of those are doing the migrations to South America and back. So it's thinking about all of these things. They're all interlinked, and it's thinking about those knock-on effects. But yeah, you're absolutely right. But what we're going to see is we're just going to see much more extremes as we go on.
Lee Johnstone here, aka The Bearded Gardener, and I'm thrilled to be with you once again. Just a quick recap of who I am. I'm a gardening and mental health advocate, so I have lived experience of poor mental health, and I use the garden to help me heal and to help improve my health and well-being. And I talk a lot about that journey on my social media channels, at Bearded Gardener, and at various events and workshops and everything else that I do. So it's Mental Health Awareness Week. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to talk about an area that I'm really passionate about, which is children and young people's mental health. I do a lot of work with children and young people, both in my professional day job, running a theatre company, but also in the work I do in gardening. And I do have a daughter of 1.5 years, so I'm all too aware of how I'm raising her and how I'm supporting her mental health, because there is a mental health crisis amongst children and young people that we really need to tackle at the moment. I believe gardening can be one small tool in an arsenal of techniques and strategies that can help young people thrive in life. I don't think gardening is the ultimate answer. I want to be clear that when I talk about gardening to help support mental health and well-being, it's not that I think gardening is the answer and you need to do nothing else. Gardening can be one of the ways it can help and support young people. And I think it does that through several ways. It's fun, it's physical, so it's helping young people be active, getting exercise, which releases those endorphins. It provides opportunities for children to work together and to connect, to build friendships, raise self-esteem. And it's relaxing, as it is for us adults. It relieves stress, and all of that can help a happy and positive child. And I think my key message when I'm talking about getting children, young people involved in gardening is to get them hooked on something that really interests them and really sparks their interest. Young people are naturally curious. They will soak up all of what you're showing and telling them. So if you can get them hooked on something, which could be, I don't know, mint that smells like chocolate, or tomato plants, and then you grow the tomatoes with them and make ketchup. Anything like that is a good hook and hopefully will spark their interest to get involved in gardening in the future. I was at a mental health seminar at the weekend with some university students, a little bit older than the children and young people I usually work with, but they were telling me how they'd really suffered during the pandemic with their mental health, trying to study and trying to work remotely while being locked in their university rooms, having no connection to family or friends, and actually their mental health took an absolute battering. Some of them were telling me that they tried to grow houseplants. Some of them had balconies that they were growing herbs on. And I did a session where we were just feeling the soil, and literally it was like a huge pressure valve had been released as they were just getting their hands in the soil and talking about how nice it made them feel. And I think it's all of that. It's all of that for children and young people. It's getting them dirty. My daughter is rolling around in the gravel and the dirt, and she really enjoys getting her face in the grass at the moment. And I'm going to let her do that because we don't want to put barriers in the way to... We want to encourage children and young people to go outside, get creative, get dirty and get growing. I think if I was to talk about things to grow with children and young people, obviously one of the easy go-tos is sunflowers. They're fun. You can do competitions. You can measure the sizes against other members of the family, which is really fun. I always talk about growing herbs and veg and fruit with children and young people because they can then use it. They can eat it. There's a reward there for watching that plant grow, from nurturing it and then to cooking with it. So I think that's really, really exciting. Also fun flowers as well. I'm a one for, I like dahlias. Obviously dahlias are really fun, colourful, bright. Calendula I love, cosmos, all the things that I tend to grow anyway. And also wildflowers, because you're encouraging wildlife into the garden. You can get young people interested in counting the bees, counting the butterflies, building a bug hotel. So yeah, I think maybe my mantra or my task for the next few months in the summer is to get more children and young people involved in gardening, and maybe some of you can do that too. It's been amazing being with you, talking with you. I hope you've enjoyed my little sections of this podcast. Do go and follow me at Beardy Gardener. And until the next time, happy gardening.
Let's talk about Armenia, because I noticed on your website that Armenia is a project for you this year. And the first thing that came to my mind is I'm pretty sure Kim Kardashian comes from Armenia. So I think not only should you have David Attenborough as a patron of the charity, you should get in touch with Kim Kardashian and get her on board as well.
Yeah, I think it's certainly been an interesting choice.
Right.
Well, the thing is, I have to say, those sort of things, they always sound funny and frivolous, but that is how you reach the masses sometimes. And just before you answer, I just want to jump in. I remember last week or the week before, Ellie Goulding, the singer, she went to the Wakehurst Place Seed Bank. and gave that coverage. And it was so unexpected. But that means that seeds and that kind of awareness is getting in front of a completely different audience, which is kind of sometimes what we need, even though it does seem very unexpected. Yeah,
absolutely. I 100% agree with you. The conservation world is this green bubble, basically. And we've got this challenge that ultimately some things like COP, you'd all heard about COP, and you'd have heard about the trying to halt deforestation by 2030. Those claims were made many years before, but what it's becoming, but we're still, I think it was in 2021, we still lost 3.7 million hectares of tropical rainforest. So these things are still happening. So that's the equivalent of 10 football pitches every minute. So, so we're still doing that. So we're still seeing that. But what we've got to do is we've got to get to the wider audience. We've got to get to a wider group of people. Because if not, it's going to be people like us talking and kind of speaking about what could be seen as being quite niche. But actually, this is something that we're all facing. This is something that we're all going. Which is why, to be honest, I reached out to you after having this conversation with Barney, I reached out to you because my challenge and my task is to get to a wider group of people.
Right.
So I could come on and I could talk to you about birds, I could talk to you about orangutans, I could talk to you about all of these kind of things. But actually, there's a whole group of people who are interested in a whole load of other stuff. So plants being one of those. So we need to speak to as many people and make them realise that actually they can all do something, and they can all actively play a part in tackling these issues that our planet faces. And actually, that's another kind of an interesting point when we talk about planet, is actually the planet will continue, but what we're going to do is we're going to make it uninhabitable is the issue, really. So we need to save a species, and that species is us, but we can only do that collectively. So we need to do that. And I think it's that comes down to reaching as many people as possible. So, which is also another reason why kind of segue way back to Armenia, is that we have all of these projects that all have different stories to tell. So Armenia, one of the first reasons we were there was because they believed there was the possibility that there could still be Caucasian leopard in this area. So there's less than 1,500 of those in the world, and one hadn't been seen in Armenia for, I think it was something like 15 to 20 years. But actually, there was an organisation working there who believed that they had sightings and actually protecting this area from hunting. Actually, leopards have started using it. But the other thing about Armenia is, and what will really interest you, is that this place is just a sea of flower meadows. It is, from the images I've seen, the conversations I've had there, it's just a floral display. I think there's getting on for 4,000 species of plants in Armenia. And again, around about 30% of those are endemic, so are endemic to Armenia. But what's really interesting, and what I had a conversation with our previous conservation director before he passed away, was he did a kind of a survey. He was a botanist, and he had a garden, and he loved his garden. And he believed around about 20% of the plants in his garden in the UK originated from, or had origins from, Armenia. So lots of the plants that we will see in our garden centres and nurseries and in people's gardens and hanging baskets and things potentially will have come from the subspecies of these plants that are found in Armenia.
Wow. I just realised, sorry, I think I've said wow like 15 times throughout this and not much else. Just because I'm just I'm so caught up in listening to what you're saying. I'm like, wow. No,
we need to get you out, you guys out to a project. We need to get you to certainly out to whether it's in Armenia or one of the projects in America. I would love for you to have a conversation with Lou, because I think you would Lee Jost, the guy from Ecuador, because he is. Well, put it this way, Attenborough said there was a conversation happening, and Attenborough walked away and said, "Wow, he's remarkable. He's just this incredibly interesting guy who just spends hours and months kind of wandering the forests of Ecuador." So
Ecuador, here we come.
Yeah, do it. And I'll see if I can wangle myself onto that trip as well. So, because I think that'd be pretty amazing. But yeah, I feel really privileged, if I'm being honest, because I came to work for World Land Trust 10 years ago. But prior to that, I used to design packaging. And I used to choose fragrances for products and things like that, so it was very different. But now I come and there's probably not a week where I don't sit down and I just kind of see the things that come in from our partners and I'm going, wow. So whether it's a new frog species that nobody else has ever seen, and I suddenly get this video to have a look at, and you're kind of like, wow, that's so cool. Or whether it's, talking to Lou and he sends a message and he's kind of like, yeah, I went out and I found 5 new trees, and you're like, what the? And you can't. Sometimes I just can't get my head around that, and then to speak to people and find there's just so many people who actually care.
Yeah,
that's nice. Just to be part of that for me is just such a wonderful experience.
Yeah, I bet. And isn't it just completely amazing how humans have kind of taken over, the planet and done what they've done, and I find us all completely bananas for it. But how we still haven't found probably the majority of, species on the planet anyway. There's so much more to discover. And in the meantime, some of it's going to be extinct before we even discover it, or just about to be, or endangered before we even discover it. And I find that kind of mind-blowing. We see all the trees that we see and the plants we see, and we think that that's all there is, but it is not. There's so much more.
But I know in some of our projects, there's still things to be named. So I know there's things that have been seen or have been found, and then they're kind of going through the name registry. But on the flip side of that, also, the other things that I find amazing is that, so the project in Guatemala, there was a species of salamander called the Jackson climbing salamander, which hadn't been seen for 70 years, was thought to be extinct, turned up in a reserve. There was a reserve in Colombia where it was the Antiquita brush finch, which was only known from records in a museum, suddenly appeared in a reserve, thought was extinct. So this is incredible. And I don't know. Did you see the thing the other day about the seed that was grown on a plant that was grown from a seed that was found in a permafrost? Did you see that? So this is a prehistoric plant. So it's been grown in a tube from permafrost. It was a seed that was found, But I'm kind of going, well, actually, that's great and that's really interesting. But hang on a minute, there's all these other things that can still be found. There's still all this other stuff to be discovered, So it's just crazy. It's just crazy what's out there and what are we missing and what have we overlooked. But also, what have we lost? But what we try to be at World Land Trust, we just try to be positive and try to be optimistic, because we could sit and get a little bit kind of down about things, with some of, like the facts I threw in about the rate of forest loss. We want to be seen to be proactive, but most important, we want to give people the opportunity to do something. Give them solutions, and that's the most important thing.
I think that's a really important point to make, is that it's very easy when we talk about climate change and really what humans have done to the planet, to feel very negative about it and to get overwhelmed by it and to wonder what it is that you can possibly do, to help. And the kind of work that it feels like a lot. And then our human brains go, we won't do anything because we don't know what to do, and what you're doing is really important. And it's so important to bring that positivity back to it, because there is there is a way that we can all help. That, you know, we can make change. We can halt the rapid
this
decline.
needs to be tangible, and something
it needs to be
hold of.
exactly that. It needs to be tangible. You need to know what it is that we can do. You need to support, you know, charities and people doing the kind of thing that you're doing now. So with that in mind, you know, with that kind of like a positive approach to what we can do, what do you think the future of biodiversity is, you know, for the planet, if we can turn this around?
Oh, big question.
Yeah, it is.
She likes a bombshell.
yeah, absolutely. So I think this is our best chances now.
Mm-hmm.
The worst thing we can do is nothing. But we're at a point where they believe that, you know, we're part way into what they believe was going to be the most important decade for the climate and biodiversity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think we've all got our part to play in it, in trying to address this. I think we saw what is possible if you go to the absolute extremes when we are all in lockdown and during pandemics, you know, how things can repair. You know, there's things in history which have shown where if we put our minds to it and we do things. So, you know, I'm probably a bit older than you guys, but I don't know, back in the day, it was all about the ozone layer and banning CFC.
I remember that kind of punctuated our childhoods, really.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so, you know, everybody was kind of, you know, using aerosol cans, and, you know, teenage boys having to use less deodorant because, you know, it was kind of the CFCs. But we've shown that we can do it. We've seen probably in recent history is the impact that collective action can have around the use of plastic. And now we need to have that same kind of drive and that same commitment now around addressing climate and the climate change, and also addressing biodiversity loss. And I think as I said, we can all do stuff. So we can all look at what we consume, what we use, how we use it. But even down to, you can kind of create your own little mini reserves in your gardens, and, you know, whether it's or in a window box, everybody can do something. You know, everybody can do that little bit, but we can all think about, you know, how we consume stuff. And, you know, I'm not going to sit here and kind of say I'm perfect, because I know I'm not. But, you know, there's things that I can address and there's things that I can look at, you know, and I try to make the right decisions. And yeah, you know, and it is, if it's possible, and I understand at the moment we're all in a state where we're dealing with economic crisis. You know, we've all got bills to pay and all of those things. So I kind of understand that charities can be a luxury. So there's a lot going on, and, you know, and there's a lot of requests and demands put on people to try and support organisations, but genuinely is not just because I work at World Land Trusts, but I do genuinely believe that our approach is the right approach, because it has all, you know, if you protect an area of forest and you protect the land, it protects, as I said, all of the biodiversity, all from those microspecies all the way up to those trees. And those trees are already absorbing and locking in carbon, which is having a positive impact on climate, whilst dealing with that biodiversity. And so I just think that approach is the right approach. I'm not saying other organisations are doing it wrong, but I think is that what we can do is we can be optimistic, and we can offer people something really tangible to do. And I'm not just sat here saying I'm optimistic for the sake of it, but I genuinely believe that we can address this. I genuinely believe if we get the right momentum and the right number of people and the right organisations working in the same direction, is that we can turn this around. And I think, you know, technology will play a part, and I think technology will catch up. But whilst we're waiting for that, is that we need to protect what's there, because if not, we're going to lose things at a crazy rate.
Okay.
Yeah, I get it. Makes sense, totally.
So, in terms of listeners, what do you really want them to do? Like, where can they find out more about you guys? What would you like them to do to get involved? Kind of what is tangible that they could really kind of grab hold of and kind of find out more about you guys and support you?
So we're on the website, so wildlandtrust.org. We're all over social media as well.
Okay.
So all the main channels, we've even ventured into TikTok. But yeah, I think what do I want people to do is, I think the first port of call is go and look at what we have to offer and what we do. So, and and it's our role to inspire and engage people. So visit Wildland Trust website, visit social media, look what we're doing and what we're doing with our partners. At that point, if we've done our job and we've shown what we can do and we can demonstrate those things and show the impacts we're having, there's various different things that people can do. So you're going to have listeners who financially might not be in a position to support what we do. But actually what they can do is they can amplify our message. So they can support through social. They can amplify our stories. They can share and they can tell people what we do and show what we're doing. So, I understand there's people who financially can't do that. Then there's different ways in to support Wildland Trust, whether you can plant a tree of Wildland Trust, which is £5. So that will plant a native tree and help its establishment of that tree. And then we have things like the Buy an Acre program, where in some countries, so at the moment, Argentina, so it's Argentina, Brazil, brain's gone, where we can protect land. We can 1 acre is £100. You don't have to spend £100. It can be a quarter of an acre, £25 or whatever. So there's all of these different routes in. And what we're trying to be is not an organisation where it's either you give us hundreds and hundreds of pounds or nothing. There's all of these things. Like I say, it could be amplification of voice. It can be planting a tree. It can be buying an acre of land. It's all of these different routes in, and that's the important thing, is to try and provide that. And the other thing is that if people do donate, so if you donate to the appeal that we've got running at the moment, Forest for the Future in Madagascar, your funds will go to that project in Madagascar. And we will only fundraise for that until we've got the funds that are needed. At that point, it's like, right, stop.
I think that's really important, actually, for someone who's donating to know where it's going. Like, just to say, well, if I'm donating for this particular project, I want to know my money's going to that project. So having that trail, so they can see, is really, really good. And also, £5 to plant a native tree seems like a deal to me.
And I think what's really cool about that is that, so that £5. Look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you there's organisations who don't do it for cheaper, because there are. But what I can tell you for that £5 with Wildland Trust is that includes collection of seeds from the forest. That includes the planting of that seed in the nursery. It has the time in the nursery, the resources in the nursery to the point of where it's big enough to plant out. Then it's planted out, and then it's maintained for at least 5 years, so to allow its establishment, so for that tree to establish. But the other thing about that is, to do that, it employs local people as well.
Yeah,
so
key. And that goes all the way back to the beginning of what you were saying, that it is important, to bring on board, the local people to that area and help them, and educate them also in what needs to be done to protect their homeland too.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing about it is they know what needs to happen as well. So they can kind of educate us too. So
two-way, absolutely.
That's what it needs to be.
Dan, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. So listeners, check out Wildland Trust online and the website as well. Keep up to date with the projects coming up, and plant a native tree, and shout about the trust, get the name out there. That's kind of one of the most important things, isn't it? So Dan, thank you for spending your time with us whilst you're on annual leave. We appreciate
no problem at all. I've loved it. It's been really lovely to catch up with you. It's nice to speak to you both.
It's great to hear from you. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Megan, known as the Carnivorous Plant Girl on Instagram and YouTube, and I specialise in the subject of carnivorous plants. I aim to spread the awareness on their research plus their care and propagation in order to aid in the future conservation of these amazing plants. This is my first contribution clip to the plant-based podcast, and this month I am talking about the beauty of carnivorous plants in the growing season. It is now May, and although it has been a slower start this year due to the very cold winter we've had, after a couple of weeks of warm weather, everything has finally started to open up and take off, and now I'm presented by a sea of colour from different types of carnivorous plants. So Sarracenia pictures in my collection are starting to open up now and colour up, so these are probably the favourite thing that I look forward to seeing each year due to the amazing display they create. So these wonderful picture plants come in a range of sizes, colours and shapes, creating a great display in the greenhouse year after year. The pictures can be anything from yellow, red, green, white or pink. The pictures later in the season, when they're fully coloured up, can be anything from like a dark purple to almost a pure black, which is definitely seen in some of the more interesting cultivars. The flytraps, on the other hand, are also a great example for creating a great display in the summer. So the flytraps is a monotypic genus, meaning that there's only one species, which is the Dionea muscipula. However, there are hundreds of cultivars which exist, which is thanks to dedicated hobbyists. Within these cultivars, there are flytraps with different looking teeth, and flytraps which are great in size, and even flytraps which are deep red in coloration. So, of course, I could talk about several carnivorous plant genus here, and which also includes like my favourite ones, like the Drosera, which is the sundews, which sparkle throughout the growing season. But each plant has a kind of special trait or traits which makes them stand out every year, and each plant is different, and so is each person. So something for everyone to enjoy, and you know, it's limitless how amazing that these plants look, especially during the growing season. This time of year, and even going into summer, is also a great time to see native carnivorous plants in the wild. So, did you know that the UK has 13 native carnivorous plants? These include your Drosera, which is your sundews, your Pinguicula, which is your butterworts, and your Utricularia, which is your bladderwort. And this is like something that I've seen in the wild before, so a couple of times. So I was camping in the New Forest a couple of years back and was amazed when I come across a patch of sundews just growing off the path that we were walking on. And it's a great experience to see these plants growing naturally in the wetlands, while being obviously surrounded by like all the different wildlife and nature that obviously comes with the area. So as carnivorous plants are found worldwide in almost every continent, you often find that there are native carnivorous plants in your country, wherever you're based. So these native carnivorous plants are often found in cultivation now, which also gives you a great idea of what you can put in an outside bog planter or container if you wanted to create one for your own garden or balcony, or even outside like on a porch, patio or windowsill. So, for example, I have a Drosera anglica and a Pinguicula grandiflora in my outside bog barrels, which are both native to the UK. They survive through the harshest of winters and they don't need any protection. Therefore, you can enjoy these plants year after year. They're basically herbaceous perennials, so they'll die back to a hibernacula in the wintertime, which is like a resting bud, and then they'll come back in the spring and you have beautiful flowers on them, and obviously they'll just look amazing in the outside bogs. So you get to enjoy them as if you were to enjoy them in the wild year after year. So these outside carnivorous plant containers are easy to make and extremely low maintenance. So they only ever need water during mainly the summer when it's really hot, and they cut back off the old growth in the winter time. Other than that, you just sit back and watch them grow. So if you want to check out some of my plants and see what I do, or even find out more about these amazing plants, then feel free to give me a follow on my Instagram. If you'd like to learn how to care for carnivorous plants, or even how to propagate them, then have a look at my YouTube channel, which is also the Carnivorous Plant Girl, which is the same as my Instagram, or even check out my blog, which has some tips and tricks on there, as well as looking into how to create your own carnivorous plant bog, and that is the Carnivorous Greenhouse. So thank you again for Ellen and Michael for inviting me to do these clips. I've really enjoyed sharing carnivorous plant tips and tricks every month, and I hope I've encouraged a couple of you to try these extraordinary plants.
Hi everyone. Well, I know that you are expecting a good old gossip right now, aren't you? But we have some really exciting news. In the meantime, Michael and I have just been a little bit busy over the last week or so, and we haven't been able to get together for a gossip. But don't worry, because on Monday, 22nd of May, Michael and I are going to finally get together, and we're going to be at the RHS Chelsea Flower Show press day. So we are going to bring you all of the gossip with a very special episode that's going to be released on Monday evening. So yes, we're going to chat, record, give you all the gossip from the show. We're going to get it out Monday evening so you can hear all about what's going on there, all the people that we've seen, all about the show garden and the floral marquee. We're really excited. So hold on just one more day and we'll be back with another bonus episode. Thank you all for listening to this week's episode of the Plant-Based Podcast. Be sure to check out our sponsor, Stoneleigh Wines. Their premium wines in New Zealand are made from 100% sustainably sourced grapes and is vegan certified also. Our favourite Stoneleigh Sauvignon Blanc displays fresh and vibrant aromas of passion fruit and citrus with crisp notes. We have our exclusive discount code for 20% off Stoneleigh Sauvignon Blanc exclusively on Amazon using the code STONELEIGH20.
The music for the Plant-Based Podcast is part of the song Grow by Mikey James, and our editor is Gareth Patch of Semi Echo.